Today we're going to make red wine from grapes. I'm with Lauren here from betterbenjamin.com, and we've got about 900 pounds of red grapes from California. Some of the Zinfandels are from Lodi, and then we've got a bunch from the Suisun Valley, which is right next to Napa. And we're gonna take all these different grapes and try to make a couple of really nice red blends out of them. So we'll get started. This big piece of equipment you're looking at here is a crusher destemmer. So what we're doing now is popping all the little berries and separating the stems from the clusters. And if you see any stuff like this, like any leaves, just pick them out as you go. If you like these kinds of winemaking videos, make sure to click the little subscribe button below. And click the bell if you want to be notified for future videos. As we crush these grapes, we're going to run some tests on them. So we're going to test the sugar, see how much sugar is in it. For a red wine, you really want to be between, say, 23% and 26 or 27% sugar. For some of the grapes that are on the higher end, like Zinfandel, Primitivo, even Cab, you can kind of push up towards the 27, where for like our Merlots, we like to be lower, but at the same time, you don't have a lot of control sometimes. You're trying to get the best grapes you can, but you're also gonna try to make the best wine with whatever grapes you get. So we're running those tests. We're using a hydrometer to run those, and when we're in the place where we're buying our grapes, we're using a refractometer to get a ballpark on the sugar levels of those grapes. The second thing we're testing, just as a quick test, is the pH. So you really want to get a pH meter if you're going to make wine from grapes. And the ballpark, what ballpark do you think we should be in for pH, Lauren?
Usually, you want between 3.3 and 3.5.
Yeah, I think 3.3 to 3.5, 3.6, and it's going to depend on the grapes. Lauren likes to hug the lower end of the pH. Ideally, my perfect grapes, I would say, would be like 3.4 to 3.5, and as fermentation happens, and malolactic fermentation, that's slowly going to climb up, and you might end in the 3.6 to 3.7 range, which is a really, really good place to be. So we'll go ahead and just keep crushing here, put Lauren to work.
Yep.
Lauren's back there mixing up some potassium metabisulfite. That's something you really want to do when you get grapes like this that have been trucked across the country. She's putting some sulfites in to kill any mold, like just kind of hold back any molds or bad bacteria. You could have like Acetobacter, which is a bad bacteria, creates vinegar. Chalecara, really bad yeast. Some of the wild yeasts can be pretty bad, Schizosaccharomyces. So you just want to hold all that stuff back so that your actual wine yeast that you're putting in can become the dominant fermenter and make a nice, healthy fermentation. Now, of course, you could do a wild fermentation, but it's really, really risky. All those bad yeasts and bacteria that I just mentioned, you're kind of holding yourself susceptible to all of those, and any one of those could dominate that must and kind of make a big pile of nail polish remover or vinegar or just all kinds of bad stuff. So personally, I like to have some control over what yeast I use, which is why I choose the yeast myself. So since these grapes look really nice and healthy, we're really not going to add a lot of sulfites. We're going to add about 40 parts per million of free SO2, which comes out to about 1 gram per 2 bins. So we've got 36-pound bins, and 1 gram per 2 bins gets us a decent little sulfite addition to suppress that bacteria and wild bad yeasts. And we'll just keep picking some stuff out of here. You never know what you're going to find in a bin of grapes. For the most part, it's just going to be a bunch of leaves, but if they're hand-picked, you could find some pieces of paper, you could find a pack of cigarettes. You really never know what could be in these things. So we didn't do any washing of the grapes, and we really won't. We don't want to add any more water than we have to. We're just going to count on the sulfites to take care of any bad bacteria and things like that. And there's really nothing harmful. It's more just things that could make the wine, less desirable. One thing you'll notice about the more premium wine grapes is how small they are. So these are little blueberry-sized grapes. This varietal here is Merlot. And by having these nice tiny little grapes, you get a lot of skin for the amount of juice that you have. So you have a really good skin to juice ratio, which will just help kind of make a bigger bodied, fuller, more kind of flavorful red wine. And that's one of the things you really want to look for. You also want to make sure the seeds are mature. You want to get, brown seeds that when you crunch them in your mouth, they kind of crunch. They don't like stick to your teeth too bad or anything. And aside from that, it's just watching the numbers, the sugars, the pH, and if you really want to, you can run the TA, which is the titratable acidity. What I didn't mention is, what if your sugars are off? So if you don't have enough sugar, say you're only like 21% sugar or 21 Brix, in that case, you could add a little bit of table sugar to bring that must up to where you want it to be. Now, if you have too much sugar, like 28, 29% sugar, that's a little bit trickier, I would say. If you can blend with a wine that's on the lower sugar, that's probably the best way to solve that problem. The other thing you could do is you could water back. You could use acidulated water, so adjust water. You don't want chlorinated water, so you can put a dechlorination filter in your hose, but adjust the water to the right acid level using tartaric acid, and you can add a little bit of water back, but personally, that's about the last thing I ever want to do. I'll try all kinds of other tricks, or just make a really higher alcohol wine before I'll ever water back. Now, if you have grapes that are maybe bigger, like maybe not as high of quality, what you can do to try to sort of improve that skin to juice ratio is you can pull some juice off in the first about 48 hours, and you can make a rosé with that juice. So when I have situations like that, I'll usually pull off up to anywhere from 15% to all the way up to 30 or 35%, and basically end up with two wines. You end up with a premium red wine and with a nice rosé that you can drink young. So some cool tricks you can do. We'll go ahead and keep on crushing here. So all the grapes are crushed and destemmed. I've made some acid adjustments to this big wine, which is mostly Zinfandel with a little bit of Merlot, but everything else looked to be pretty good on its own. If you're going to make an acid adjustment, about 1 gram per liter should move the pH down about 0.1, but it's kind of not really that reliable. Every must is a little bit different, so you really don't want to do it all at once. I would target about half or 2/3 of what you think you need to add that, and let it sit for at least a day in the must before you go and add any more. I've also added a little bit of pectic enzyme. You can also add things like Lalzyme from Scott Labs. That'll just help extract as much color as possible. And I've pulled off about 20% to make a rosé, which will pump up this wine a little bit more, make a little bit of a bolder wine while making a rosé. And we're going to go ahead and we're just going to let this come up to temperature. We're going to bring it up pretty quick, maybe with a space heater. We don't want to bring it up too slow and let any wild yeast that might have survived the sulfite try to take off. And then we'll get started with a yeast starter. So if you want to see the progression of this wine, stay tuned and we'll show you what the next steps are to make a red wine. Thanks for watching.